Okay, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So even though people are still coming in, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Sophie Ziegler. I am the events coordinator with Library Juice, and I am here to welcome you and to say a little bit about Library Juice before I turn over to my different role, my alternate role today as moderator for this conversation. But to get us started, Library Juice has three main arms. We have Library Juice Academy, which is our online professional development for all of us in the library and archives and information professional world. This is where we have courses on all the things that we didn't quite learn in library school, or maybe that changed significantly, or that we are hoping we wouldn't have to know, but our jobs changed under us. You can find more about us at libraryjuiceacademy.com. We also have Library Juice Press, where we put out books and articles on critical angles of LIS. We've been doing this for about 20 years. We have a wonderful backlist of titles. I hope you'll take a look. We also have new titles, two of which we'll be talking about today, coming out all the time. You can find more about us at litwinbooks.com. We are an imprint of Litwin Books. So take a look there. You can find our journals and our books, find out about all the great things that are coming up. And then finally, we have our third arm, Library Juice Connections, which is what brings us all together today. We work with authors from Library Juice Press and instructors from Library Juice Academy to talk about topics of interest to the community. Again, the community writ large, including all of us in the information ecosystem. We also do standalone events that people reach out and say, "Hey, this is a topic that we're very interested in. Nobody's really talking about it," or "I would like to talk more about it. Can we please do an event?" And so we work with community members all the time for that sort of thing. You can find a wonderful and growing collection of recorded events at libraryjuiceconnections.org, as well as the contact us, where you can talk about also working with us to do an event. We would love that. We always love working with folks. And that is everything I wanted to say about Library Juice. At this point, I'm going to shift over and become the moderator of our presentation today. So, welcome again, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. Again, my name is Sophie Ziegler. I have 15 plus years in the archives and library world, and I think a lot about AI like most of us do. So, I'm very excited for this panel. I'm very excited to hear everybody's thoughts. And this is from people who think a lot about this. So let me go ahead and do the introductions first, and then we'll jump into some questions and discussions. Our first panelist to introduce is Maria Accardi, who is the author of Feminist Pedagogy for Library Instruction from 2013, for which she received the ACRO Women in Gender Studies Section Award for Significant Achievement in Women in Gender Studies Librarianship. She is also co-editor of Critical Library Instruction in 2010 and editor of the Feminist Reference Desk, Concepts, Critiques, and Conversations from 2017. Her current project is a co-edited collection of essays entitled Critical Perspectives on AI and Librarianship, to be published with us at Library Juice Press in 2027. Welcome, Maria. Sam Popowich is next. Sam is an academic librarian in Winnipeg, Canada. He is the author of Confronting the Democratic Discourse in Librarianship from 2019, Solving Names, Worldliness and Metaphysics in Librarianship, 2024, and the forthcoming Knowledge Capital, Culture, Class, and Artificial Intelligence, which will be published by Library Juice Press. He has a PhD in political science from the University of Birmingham and is a member of the University of Winnipeg Center for Research and Cultural Studies, and he teaches in the university's Cultural Studies program. Kailyn Slater is a Chicago-based public library worker and independent scholar at the intersection of information studies, critical cultural studies, science and technology studies, and contributes to library trends, information technology and libraries, fast capitalism, and the American Archivist. They are the winner of the 2025 annual Library Juice Paper Contest for their work against AI, Critical Refusal in the Library. Kay has an MS LIS from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and an MA in Communications from the University of Illinois, Chicago. And then lastly, we have Tessa Withorn. Tessa is a science librarian and associate professor at the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky. She has published and presented on a variety of topics, including library instruction, critical information literacy, online learning, and artificial intelligence, and is currently working to co-edit, along with Maria, the essays in the forthcoming title, Critical Perspectives on AI and Librarianship. Again, to be published by Library Juice Press in 2027. And that's what I meant when I said Library Juice Press has all sorts of wonderful things coming out in the very near future. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. And I just want to jump in now that we're ready. And I would like to ask, I'm very interested in briefly, whatever briefly means in this scenario. I want to know about your concerns and or hopes, if you have hopes, around AI and librarianship. And Maria, if you don't mind, I'll bounce this to you first.
All right. Thank you. Thank you also for having me here today. And it's been wonderful to see all these names and the attendees and seeing lots of familiar names. Okay, here I am. Concerns and hopes. Well, where to begin? That's a long list. But the first thing that came to mind of many things is I'm concerned about AI's tendency towards sycophancy and how this affects patrons, specifically the college students I work with. This is very much informed by my perspective as an academic librarian who's been doing this for 20 years. There's an article, research summary in Science earlier this year that's kind of haunted me. And that this tendency to agree with and affirm users in ways that can discourage self-correction or critical thinking, or even the desire to ask questions. So that's something I'm worrying about a lot. And as librarians and educators, our role isn't just to make learners comfortable, but to create relational safety so they can tolerate the discomfort and uncertainty that learning often requires. And if we can engage with AI critically and thoughtfully while continuing to promote information behavior that is independent and informed and confident, the tendency towards sycophancy and extinguishing what Pope Leo XIV in his encyclical called the desire to ask questions, which is another thing that I read earlier this year that I've been thinking about a lot. So the Pope, science, I mean, it all fits together.
Sam, I'll bounce the same question over to you if you don't mind.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I tend to have two parallel sets of concerns, I think. Both of them are related to what I see as the corporate, well, not what I see, related to the corporatization and commodification of higher education and cultural work more generally. One is around downsizing and outsourcing. So Ted Underwood, who's a pretty prominent digital humanist, put out on Twitter recently, or not on Twitter, on Blue Sky, this idea that critics of AI ought to have more grace because this is all brand new and we haven't seen it before. But of course, workers in general and library workers have seen this before, the kind of digital replacement of labor. We saw it in the outsourcing and decimation of cataloging departments 30 years ago. We've seen it in the outsourcing of library technology, which is still ongoing. And part of today's AI environment is exactly that. It's replacing library work with not just new technologies, but outsourced corporate new technologies that we don't have any control over. The other part of it is, and I think this dovetails with what Maria just mentioned, is fears around the lack of, or the decline in reading, the decline in being able to understand written texts, the increasing impossibility of dealing with written texts on their own. And this predates today's AI moment. We've seen concerns around extractive reading going back at least a decade. But for example, the replacement of article abstracts with AI-generated summaries in library databases is essentially being forced on us to a large extent. And we don't know what that's going to mean. And we have an inkling about what that's going to mean in terms of students' abilities to engage with written texts on their own terms. And yeah, I don't really have many hopes for it. I feel like capitalist technology has not been kind to libraries, education, or the cultural sector, and so this is just going to continue that process apace. Anyway, that's about it for now. Thanks.
Just to echo what Maria and Sam just said, and thanks again for having me on this great panel today. Yeah, my larger concern is about the capitalist market forces that are encouraging this behavior by institutions. So just like overarching techno-solutionism, just the idea that in the face of burnout and minimal hiring tracks or ability to hire, that products become the replacement for workers, whether if it's as a tool, quote unquote, for now, or if it becomes a full replacement is sort of to be seen depending on which sector of library work you're in. I don't think, for example, AI can fully replace reference work, but I think also something that I find is a concern is the idea of private equity as a solution for the funding of different kinds of library work and different kinds of library corporations. So that's just a general concern to the larger infrastructure. But I do think this is illuminating, at least for library workers, in terms of what the material infrastructure is for our work in general. I mean, I'll just speak honestly. I'm relatively early in my career, so I don't have the same kind of background as maybe other folks do about historical shit, just in real person experience. But I think that at least for folks who I was in library school with really recently, it's become very clear how our work is all going to always involve computers, but that we can hopefully try to work towards solutions that aren't fully like corporate private computer based. So I do have some hope for an eventual lack of dependence on for-profit models. I think at some point the products will become just too expensive, especially for public libraries. And just from a political point of view, we can't let big tech try to do our jobs for us. Microsoft in particular is saying in press releases that they believe that their data center build out will be the reason that they can now do and help library workers do our jobs that we already do. So I think overall, there's a impetus for us to, not that we feel like we are forced to move to new solutions, like capitalism always kind of does this historically, but I think that eventually we will find some kind of break in this, and we have to believe that there will be a break in this for that to happen. I also think there should be an impetus for library workers to become more involved in community conversation around public records laws and utilities laws, how environmental resources are being distributed within local communities. Just in my research I've been doing with Library Futures in the last year or so, states like Arkansas and Florida have used the data center build out and its backlash as an opportunity to change how, where, and if the public can access information about public-private development before deals are finalized. So governments are seeing how the public is responding and moving accordingly, and that tends to mean in states that are more fascistic than others, there tends to be a desire to close the doors more than open them.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I look forward to talking more about the work that you're doing over there. Tessa, let me get you to weigh in on this.
Yeah, sure. So I think in my own terms, I think my greatest concern is tech bros ruining the world. All these labor market forces are really important. I think as an instruction librarian in higher education, I think the concern that's most at the forefront for me is the impact on education. I saw a video just the other day about a school children's agenda that was AI generated, and the state names are like nonsense words. So, we're seeing this every day. And I think that's where, AI resistance becomes really important, because we're seeing it invade all parts of our life. In my own personal life, I can't even watch Instagram cat videos without seeing another thing about AI. I'm kind of tired of it, but it's here, and it's here. But I think also in the higher education sphere, I've been very much thinking about these narratives of AI inevitability and how we're really pushing this on students. And I think sometimes the argument is that they need AI literacy skills for the workforce, which I'm not arguing with. I think a lot of companies are looking for that in new graduates, but I think we're not really letting students, as Maria was talking about, think creatively and really imagine a better world where we're not forced to overwork and we're not forced to use tools that we deem morally wrong. And so I think I will end with a hope, because I do have one hope. I have two hopes. I have one hope that, librarians, and, I really encourage everyone today, as we're having these conversations, to really think about what we can do within our own spheres of influence influence to push resistance or refusal or just starting a conversation, because I think librarians, are experts in information systems in a lot of ways. And I think we know what we're talking about when we talk about AI. So I hope that, in classrooms, we can talk with students about this. College is a great time to get students thinking critically about the world and society. So I think we have an opportunity there. But I also just want to say, I hope that we all as human beings can have collective action against some of these greater harms. I appreciate what Kay was saying about kind of some of the data center things. And it's, gross environmental racism, and as a society, we have to stand up to that. And I think librarians can be informed citizens and good researchers that can help more local grassroots movements that are trying to actually affect change in the world. So I'm hopeful that we can play a role.
I love that. Thank you. This came up a little bit in y'all's answers, and I just want to sort of zero in on it a little bit more. So we're all seeing a lot of AI hype just sort of out in the world. We're watching it, roaring cat memes. I'm also very interested in your thoughts about how it is that the various forms of AI are showing up in libraries today, right? Like let's zero in a little bit more on us as librarians. How are we seeing that happen? And Tessa, if you don't mind, I'll just stay with you for this one.
Yeah, sure. So I have a little bit of an embarrassing admission in that when Google first rolled out their AI overviews, it was a lab experiment. And I was sitting on my couch one evening and I saw this little like bubbly beaker icon. I was like, ooh, let me click on that. And, it was the Google AI overviews. And I think as a librarian and someone who's very interested in search systems, I was just really fascinated. And I want to say we still knew the harms of AI. And so I was kind of consciously subjecting myself to this testing, right? And kind of thinking about how it would work and how it would affect students and the everyday person. And so I wrote about that a little bit in College and Research Libraries News. And so I very early on was really thinking about how it was influencing searching. And I've continued to be really interested in that. I was early on bringing up in library instruction classrooms, like, are you all seeing this AI overview? Like, what do you think? And some students would say, oh, it's actually kind of helpful. Like, I don't actually have to click on a link. I just get the answer. While other students were really, disturbed by it. And we had all those goofy examples of like putting glue on pizza that the AI overview told people to do. So it became this kind of like viral thing, but now it is everywhere. Students don't really know how to opt out of using Google because it's so pervasive, even though there are alternatives. So again, going into, our role and what we can do. But also in the research context, all of our databases, Sam was mentioning this, and I'm sure that he can say more about this too, but, EBSCO now has natural language searching and Elsevier has AI overviews. So I'll let Sam talk more about that specifically. But I see it in our search systems, but also as a STEM librarian, I just want to make a few comments about how it's affecting science. I think I just I'm like full of all these like goofy examples, but it's the real world. That's what we're seeing. So, there were academic journal articles that still had prompts in them that had gone through peer review. And so, we're seeing this kind of acceleration and speed and this drive, especially in science. The least important thing is pushing out your manuscript. So why not offload that on AI, right? So that's an issue. But then we're seeing, AI in peer review as well. I have a very personal example where my scholarship was peer reviewed by AI without my consent, and that was really eye-opening. And so, what does it mean when AI is writing science and AI is reviewing it? That is troubling. So I think other people can maybe speak toward other aspects of librarianship. So I'll let others speak.
Thank you for that. Kay, I'm very interested in what you have to say about this.
Yeah, so I'm the public library worker of the group, and we are honestly seeing not as probably heavy use comparatively, like within our full work like ecosystem, but there are products available within our regular email providers like Google or Microsoft. So I have seen admin, for example, using Gemini to do internal staff communications, formatting board reports, things like that. Haven't had a prompt like explicitly put in those emails yet, but you can kind of tell by the language that like they're using something else to write. But in terms of working with patrons, I work in a makerspace. So I see a lot of folks coming in with generated flyers, graphics. I've seen folks try to reformat graphics from 2D to 3D for 3D printing, which is just like not going to work in a 3D printer. So we have a lot of times where folks come in and like have ideas about projects, And we have instructions to help them make those projects, like with the thing like Canva or other kinds of programs, which Canva admittedly does have AI products within it, but they're easier to kind of avoid than I think others. But they come in and they become like accustomed to kind of like working with these products. And so they have asked us to help them prompt the chatbots to change what the graphic will look like when we kind of tell them like, hey, it is easier for you to just use the mouse to click and change the thing on Canva. It may take more time, I guess, but overall it ends up costing them more time to try to prompt ChatGPT to try to get the right thing that they want. And then the image doesn't really end up with the right kind of format, the right quality. We end up having to reshape it anyway for the actual physical object we're creating. So it ends up creating more work for us during patron interactions with folks when we have our open hours. That is those extra 10, 20, 30 minutes add up, and that it like limits us from helping other patrons in that moment. So that's where we're really seeing it, like at least in my context of a makerspace. But we also do tech help work as well outside of our makery kind of open hours. So we have a lot of folks coming in who are really sick and tired of random pop-ups, the interface changing a lot. UX designers may think that these like changes are really seamless, but especially for a lot of patrons and a lot of older adult patrons, like the like how the phone looks and what needs to be consistent for them to be able to use the phone in a way that makes sense. And that's true, I think, for everybody, but especially for folks who come in who have a lot less maybe like tech literacy or digital literacy, it is a problem. So they're just coming in and they're feeling really escalated, feeling really fearful. And we have to meet them where they are and try to engage in some kind of like tech education conversation. So it has been an opportunity for us to talk about the value of the library and why, people should just come in and use our resources. But at the same time, people are coming in with a sense of hopelessness and nihilism that can be difficult to have a conversation around in only a couple of minutes you have with the patron. But we try to have programs that are more dialogue focused to that degree, but the like misinformation, disinformation ecosystem on Facebook and Twitter is like literally like rage baiting people, and they're coming in feeling really escalated. So that's been, I think, an effect of AI's sort of like marketing and like making a casino out of these platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, I know you mentioned some of the effects, AI summaries, etc., in your previous answer, but I'd love to hear anything you have to say about this.
One, I mean, I think it was Tessa maybe who used the word invaded, and it really has made its way into kind of a whole bunch of aspects of library work. Besides being added as sort of tools to various databases, we've had requests from faculty and researchers who want to upload material to an LLM so that they can query it or have a conversation with it, whatever the current way is of describing that interaction. And we have to be careful about that. Not just from a copyright perspective, which I don't particularly think is that relevant anymore. I don't think it's central to the discussions that we're having. But just in terms of a question about what is it that they think they're accomplishing by uploading those documents and interacting with them through an LLM, because the hype affects them too. On the flip side of it, there was a case this morning of a history professor who sort of went viral on social media for putting out an AI-generated historical essay produced out of a bunch of documents that he had uploaded. And he was arguing that this was an example of the kind of cutting-edge original historical research that a GPT could produce. Well, I took a look at it, and it was awful. It was a first-year history paper at best. It certainly wasn't original historical research. And I think one of the problems there, and this goes back to kind of the early days in 2022, I guess, of the first round of GPTs, where there were historians writing in the Chronicle of Higher Education about how this was going to change historical work and really open it up. But so when they approach these things, a lot of their own disciplinary norms and kind of quality control mechanisms, not to call it critical thinking, kind of goes out the window. Because I think someone mentioned solutionism a little while ago. The idea that there's some magic bullet to get behind the sources that they have to read and digest. And one of the things that I'm interested in, and this covers, I think, library teaching, it covers reference interactions, it covers library systems work, it covers how we approach collection development, is this kind of phenomenological question of reading. When we see all the news stories about an AI has solved an outstanding problem in mathematics, the thing that occurs to me is, well, if a human being hasn't gone through the phenomenological experience of cogitating on and understanding that proof, has it been proved, right? If a text is generated and it hasn't passed through the sort of, emotional and affective persona of a human being, is it anything but dead text? And I think a lot of the risk for us a lot of the time is that faculty, researchers, and students are going to miss that aspect of it. And I do think that libraries can be well placed in constantly reminding people of that emotional and affective and phenomenological process that is teaching and learning and reading. So yeah, that was perhaps a bit of a higher level question, not getting down to the nitty gritty of how it's entering our lives, but it's everywhere.
No, I love that. Thank you. It is everywhere. Maria, would you like to add anything?
I had a thought based on what Sam was talking about the concerns around reading, and I just wanted to mention something that was in Inside Higher Ed that was kind of circulating in the in social media a couple months ago about that complaint that students aren't doing the reading, and it pointed out something interesting, which is that which I think we can also tie back to AI, really, is that in higher ed, we're teaching students that the purpose of higher education is to get through it as quickly and efficiently and painlessly as possible so that you can get a job. So why should students spend time reading hundreds of pages when that's not efficient or fast or whatever, when they just need to get a task done? And I think we can see that coming from that with what we're teaching students, what college is for, it makes sense that they're avoiding doing the reading and turning to solutions like AI summarizers or whatever, because this is what we're telling them college is for. I mean, we generally, I'm not, that's another thing that I read recently that I can't stop thinking about. So I just wanted to add.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I want to ask, thinking about libraries specifically when it comes to AI, I'm so curious, are there areas where the use and perceptions of AI are unique to librarianship? So curious about y'all's thoughts about that, because we're really interested in, what value, and again, this came up a little bit, what value do librarians add to the broader conversation around AI? And Kay, if you don't mind, I'll start with you on this.
Yeah, I think, like I said before, especially for public library workers, and I'm sure this is true academic and special in other contexts as well, this is a chance for us to talk to patrons about the structuration of technology in society and the political economy of technology. It makes it a little more clear, I think, for the public to understand, the reason why Google locks you out of your email and requires you to have access to a cell phone is purposeful. They want you to be able to buy more phones. They want you to be able to make more accounts, to create more data. It's a pinpoint for us to have that conversation, which I don't think I've been able to have before, or it's a little more opaque before. So while there is a lot of sense of escalation, there is opportunity for us to come in and say, hey, this is not, this is kind of a conspiracy against you. That we're also with you on this. And we can sort of connect with patrons that way, which I find to be really fruitful. So at least in a public sense. But I've also been a part of Library Freedom Project's AI and Library Survey, which I don't know if you all saw in the last year or so. It went out last fall. We got about 500 responses across different library types. Half the responses were from public libraries, which is great. And across the board, there were 3 different aspects of AI and libraries that were over 80% consistency in response. So both you're concerned about misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, fake information, inaccuracy and hallucinations, and heightening fears around data privacy and cybersecurity. So these were like heralding responses about what folks who are but basically like behind service desks being like, this is what we're seeing every day, and here's how we're affected by it at work. So they both want to be able to respond in a way that actually like works with the folks in the community and not preach a get with the program kind of narrative either. Which can be sometimes, I have heard in library conferences and other spaces where folks who are administration consultants sort of saying like, we just got to kind of tell patrons this is just the way that it is. And I don't think that's really the practice of a lot of public library work. I think we always take patron interactions and try to like work with them in the way that they need versus whatever some kind of larger narrative is telling them they should behave or be in a certain way. So I think also, despite the increasing demand for help from library workers, at the time of the survey, there was pretty little institutional support that was found. Just to be really clear, this was before ALA did their AI policy. This was before a lot of surveys were going out that were also just public library focused at all about AI work, or AI in work rather. And so almost 60% of folks said that they had no AI policy at their library. About 40% reported that vendors had already put in AI features without anyone's consent. And about 40 also said that AI is being used and that the vendors aren't talking about the AI use, or they aren't being transparent about where AI is being implemented. Or they're not saying, machine learning when they are saying AI. Like they're obfuscating what the actual technology is. So library workers are being asked to kind of figure it out while all of these safeguards and accountability mechanisms don't really exist. But I want to also highlight a couple things from Library Freedom Project, just as a member. You may have seen on Tech Won't Save Us recently, Allison Macrina and Hannah Cyrus went pretty viral with their conversation. Always great to see library workers doing work in public like this and communicating to everybody in the information ecosystem. This is just, this is also our work as well. And hear us, so this is us. Oh, hey, Hannah. We're actively developing toolkits and presentation templates and bookmarks and like handouts for you to use at work. So that's my little propaganda spiel.
Thank you for that. I think that's wonderful. It's such a great example of how it is that librarian skills can be used in this type of setting. Tessa, if it's okay, I'm going to bounce it over to you now.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I think it is very unique to librarianship. And I don't know, Kay, if you were referring to the AI competency standards for AI for library workers. I remember when that first came out, and the first draft was very positive about AI, and I was just kind of shocked by that. And it's not, yeah, it was interesting that that was the first response. And I think if you look at how it is now, it's much more restrained and a lot more talking about ethical concerns and critiques for sure. But I think that is really indicative of what a lot of us were noticing with the library profession as a whole, is this kind of like knee jerk, like, oh, we have to be helpful. Oh, we have to create a LibGuide. We have to create all the LibGuides, and we have to, teach, folks AI literacy. And I think that has continued to be important, but, I can talk more at length about why I think critical AI literacy is a little bit more of a helpful framework in being helpful in teaching students these skills. But I do think that kind of what I said earlier, like librarians love technology and information access. And I think that we are experts in those systems, and, drawing a little bit on our ACRL framework, that, we have very deep questions about authority being constructed and contextual, and information has value. And I think there's a lot to be said too about the revision to the framework that is going on right now. And I think these conversations are happening, but I think even in the documentation that is coming out in these drafts and revisions and final published work, there's so many power dynamics happening within ourselves and our profession of how we think about these things. And, I think that tension is necessary, and I think it's productive. I think that that's how we eventually, I don't know. There's a lot to say. Yeah, there's a lot to say, but I think, especially with the edited collection that Maria and I are working on, we really wanted to bring together perspectives from different library types. And we can talk more about this at the end, but I think we're really seeing that librarians do have a lot to contribute to this conversation. And that book is really written to the audience of library workers, but I really think other people are going to be interested in it as well. But I do just want to make a comment, and I'm sorry if I'm veering off into different directions with this. But I think a lot of the critical voices that have come out strongly and quickly against AI are really strongly saying that, libraries are not neutral, librarians are not neutral. And I really, really believe in that. But I do think that there is a difference between being not neutral. I have very strong personal beliefs against AI, but I think that sometimes that can be in conflict with critical pedagogy and the goals of critical pedagogy, where we really want to open dialogue in the classroom and really co-create knowledge with our students, especially our students, right? When we have that power imbalance of being instructors and working with students. And I think that, in that same way of librarians wanting to be helpful in teaching how to use AI, librarians wanting to be helpful in like solving this problem by refusing and resisting AI, I just want to make sure that we're still providing autonomy for students and other patrons as we're kind of navigating all of this together. I kind of mentioned this already, but my feelings have changed. I've become increasingly more radicalized, but I think I'm still grounding myself in critical pedagogy and how we can work through this together.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And I do really hoping we have time to circle back to both to the current work that everybody is doing, because I know a lot of great stuff is happening. But I do want to stick with this for just a little bit longer. Maria, would you like to chime in about this? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
So what question are we on right now? Sorry. Our
no,
conversation is so
no.
interesting, but I don't know what the original.
Yeah, no, we're interested here in the use and perception of AI that might be unique to librarianship and how it is
Oh, okay.
here sort of fits in the conversation.
Sure. So this is something I've been talking about with my colleagues, as more and more teaching faculty are talking about AI. And at my institution, there's a very pro AI stance that's not especially critical. So what do we have to offer? And I think almost anybody can teach like how to do prompt engineering. Like, why do we gotta call it that, first of all? But okay, prompt engineering. You don't need a librarian for that, although we are experts on search queries. I think where we have expertise and add value is how we empower learners to think critically, to apply ethical frameworks, to ask interesting and useful questions, and to employ effective search strategies and making informed choices about how they engage with AI. So that's sort of my bigger picture answer. And then for me personally, who like I like to, I'm sort of, I've become kind of known as someone who likes to rabble rouse or flip tables, and it's not something that's always served me well at my institution. But I'm happy to ask uncomfortable questions in situations where I feel like perspectives are not especially critical in the sense of like usefully critiquing something. And to me, that feels unique to librarianship because that's sort of the whole basis of why I'm a librarian is to like question authority, to teach other people to question authority, including me. So I guess that's where the value I see librarians and sort of the approach to librarianship I take is being willing and able, when possible, to kind of question authority and shake things up when things seem a little too complacent. So that's my take.
I love that. I love that. Sam, same question to you.
Thanks. Yeah. I just want to go back to Tessa's point about the critical pedagogy piece and the co-learning part. And it is absolutely true that, I have very strong political views. And I was teaching philosophy of cultural studies last year. And when you're in that moment, actively working face to face with students, finding ways that just becomes the way to teach, I think. And it is extremely productive. And I think does, especially when students are bringing their own critical perspectives to these things, it does it does help, I think, round out a lot of the things that are maybe a little bit abstract to us right now. So that's absolutely a great point, I think, from Tessa. What I wanted to say about the uniqueness of this, or how it applies to libraries, is when I was working on, so I have this book coming out about AI and culture and class and Marxism for Library Juice Press. And when I was writing it, at first I was like, well, I need to make this about libraries because it's a Library Juice book. But as I went on, I figured, a lot of this stuff isn't unique to us. These are happening to other workers everywhere. It's happening to cultural and creative and intellectual workers in a way that connects up with the way it was being done to manual workers a generation ago in North America. And so I wanted to sort of not make it too specific to libraries, but also being able to trust library workers to be able to read that and make those connections, because the AI invasion is absolutely everywhere in the work that we're doing and in the way that we deal with patrons and students and faculty. And so I think, in a way, at least at this moment in time, I think we can read AI discourse that's not specifically about librarianship and just be able to make these connections. And to me, that ties back with how we approach the critical pedagogy piece, because students are going to be able to bring their own experiences with these technologies and these tools, their own experiences as workers and with labor and with automation. And in a way, all we need to do is kind of facilitate connecting those dots with them. In a way, the politics almost grows out of that. And I think that's a good feeling when that actually happens.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I really appreciate tying in the labor that we do with the labor being done by others and seeing the connections there. And I'm always very excited to hear about the new title that's happening. And I know, Sam, in addition to the title you're working on, Tessa and Maria, y'all are co-editing a book. Would you like to take a few minutes just to tell us a little bit more about that project and the types of essays that we can expect from it?
I feel like I was talking about it a little bit, but we put out a call and we got a really good diverse perspective. So, I don't want to we have some really cool titles. So as soon as you pick up the book, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that essay sounds amazing. I love that title. But, thinking about like AI slop in metadata, right? How is that erasing the work that critical catalogers do, right? How do we talk about refusal and resistance in library instruction? What are some practical applications and things that we can do in the classroom? We have folks talking about protecting vulnerable populations and oral histories that are getting scraped from AI into training. And I could just go on and on. So, Maria can maybe speak more to the structure of the book as well, but we'll have some pieces that are more through critical lenses. And so looking at feminist pedagogy or science and technology studies or just kind of your documentation theory and library and information science. So we have some folks that get really theoretical but are so engaging and write so well. And then we have folks that go into laying bare some of these issues and kind of talking about those issues more in depth. And then we have folks that are writing lessons that are more practical applications. So I was doing copy editing, which was so fun. And I just got to really deeply read and think about all these chapters all at once. And I'm very excited for the book. And I don't, Maria, what would you like to add?
Tessa's copy editing is on point. I just want to say that. So it's been an exciting project. We're really in knee deep in this right now, coincidentally. And I think I just wanted to add to that, that Tessa and I, when we started talking about the concept of this book, thinking about the messy middle, and what, for me specifically, what I find myself responding to or reacting to are the reactions around AI, especially in critical librarianship fields, and wondering if there's room for a space that isn't as polarized, perhaps, as some conversations about AI can be. And so that's kind of where the idea originally came from, and then using critical lenses to examine AI and librarianship. So I hope that people will be excited about the book. I know we're excited, but we're very close to it. And we hope it will be coming out soon next year. We don't have an exact update though.
Oh, fantastic. And we'll do another event on the book, no doubt, as well as for Sam's book. I want to talk about the work that y'all are doing a lot more, but let me pause. We do have several questions in the chat, but we also have one in the Q&A, and I'll go ahead and read that one out. This is from Dorothy. It says, do you have a sense of how long it may take for AI technology culture to reach a high level of safety, well-being, and common sense in supporting creative thinking and curiosity? Or will that cultural shift parallel effort to facilitate AI literacy and encourage students and patrons to become thinkers, use common sense, and explore their curiosity?
May I make an attempt? Okay. I don't have an answer to how long, but I do have an answer to maybe how. And which I'm hoping is related to the question here. What I'm especially interested in are pedagogical frameworks about teaching AI critically that are less about moralizing and policing and more about creating safety around teaching and learning and asking questions about AI. And so to me, that seems related to the question to create that sense of like safety and curiosity. Like you have to address sort of the relational aspects of teaching and learning and making it safe to ask questions. So I have a whole chapter about this. And so I may not have an answer to how long it will take, but I have a possible answer to an approach to a cultural shift in teaching and learning that perhaps could like leak out into the world at large.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
I might have just something quick to add to that. If that's all right. One of the things that I'm interested in is the longer duration of technological change under capitalism. And so one of the things that we see from the Industrial Revolution to now is that technology as driven by capitalist competition is always looking for places where it can maximize competitive advantage. So it's always moving from areas of low productivity to areas of high productivity until those become low productivity, and then it moves on. And what we're seeing right now is that the current AI bubble that we're in is an artificial construct. It's probably 90% vaporware, and the 10% is over-invested or over-leveraged or whatever. So I think that is likely to collapse. I maybe don't agree with Ed Zitron that's going to collapse tomorrow, but it is going to collapse. And I think if it doesn't wreck the planet, if it doesn't last long enough for the data centers to absolutely tip us over into climate apocalypse, then I think the hopeful response for where this is going to go is what usually happens to AI. And there's this thing called the AI effect, which is once the technologies become normalized, we stop calling them AI and we just start calling them what they are. So little bits of machine learning or regression, or maybe even some generative tools, some pattern recognition pieces, will be used in medical imaging or diagnostics or expert systems. But we won't have this overarching AI discourse that's going on now. And I think at that point, that becomes much more tractable for us. It becomes sort of normal technology that librarians in particular can deal with in the ways that we're sort of used to being able to deal with technology, both as librarians and as teachers and researchers. That's the hopeful side. The non-hopeful side is that just everything collapses in the next 18 months and the water wars start.
I have another question here in the Q&A from an anonymous attendee. Do panelists see AI resistance going together with general big tech pushbacks on libraries? Is it important to stay focused on AI, or should we be reevaluating toxic tech platforms more broadly, such as or your libraries on Meta, on X, etc.?
I'll jump in on this question. I think people understand that AI does come from big tech, and that is a representation of the systems that big tech, as thinking of like quote unquote the big five, like a Facebook, Microsoft, Oracle, these companies that have existed for a number of years, even decades now. That AI, as we understand it today, or generative AI, like chatbots, is like sort of the next version of things like Facebook's algorithms to program posts, for example, and to create different information ecosystems within their applications. So I think it's clear, at least to me and maybe to other library workers as well, that this is a big tech backlash. I do think it's a little bit different from maybe the Cambridge Analytica techlash that happened about almost 10 years ago, because there was, I believe, a general, which just folks who don't know, Cambridge Analytica was a firm that essentially revealed that Facebook was essentially buying information and buying votes effectively, and buying data about people's political affiliations and to help create packages for political groups to use to help skewer elections particular ways, or information about elections in particular ways, among other things. So I think that the techlash of 10 years ago was more regulatory. And I think there was a response by the American federal government to say, like, okay, we can tamper this down, especially in a Biden era administration. There was more interest in that. But now things have flipped in a very different way. Along the way, though, the tech industry, the capital of the tech industry has benefited from every single switch and move of especially the US federal government. So there is still this sort of capitalist accumulation happening, as Sam was saying, that has progressed forward. It was sort of happening kind of in two different ways. So all in all, say yes, I think like people are going to have a big resistance. I think continually to big tech, whether that comes down to like smaller tech or local network resistance, I think is going to be interesting. If people become fully analog is because like a trend right now. I don't know if that will stay the same, but I'm curious to see how that plays out.
Thank you for that. In the few minutes we have remaining, would anyone else like to take a swing at that question?
I wanted to say briefly that I think in terms of libraries push back against, things that are evil, pushing back against Elsevier, pushing back against Google. I see certain folks in libraries doing that, and I think that is part of some of these larger patterns. So I agree that it's not necessarily unique to AI, the ways that things are getting worse. I'll plug, everyone's been resharing Cory Doctorow's book and talk about initiatification, right? I think in libraries we are pushing back from things getting worse. And so I hope that we can continue to do that.
I think that is the point we're going to have to leave on. We've got more questions than we can get to. This conversation, of course, will continue in all the places, right? Historically, we are in this marketing gold rush where everything is being called AI, even though it does any number of things or nothing at all. And ideally, a burst bubble won't take us all down with it. Thank you. Big, big, big thank you to our panelists. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your insight with us. Thank you to all the attendees. We will have this recording going out in the near future. We'll send a link, in which after that, please feel free to share with your friends and loved ones. I hope everybody has a beautiful day. Bye, y'all.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us, Sophie.
Thanks, everybody.